Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be having a look at the cheapest HO scale starter set you can currently buy. I found this thing a few weeks ago while I was browsing Amazon, and I was kind of surprised to see it. So it wasn't that long ago that I did a review of what I believe to be a Model Power Clone 040, and at the end of that video, I said it would be great if they could bring back the old Model Power train sets at a good price, and it looks like I kind of got my wish, because I found this set for $68, which in today's world is not that bad for an HO scale starter set. Whether or not the quality lives up to that price, we'll have to wait and see. However, I did also find it on Alibaba for as little as between $30 and $40, which seems pretty darn remarkable for an HO scale set. And according to this, it was made in the last month of 2024, so I guess they really are making all these products once again. One thing I did find interesting, however, is that it was being sold under the Handfly name and not Eve Models, so maybe somebody else is making these and they're all getting rebadged. Who knows? But either way, as for the set itself, the box artwork doesn't seem too bad. There are some funny translations like die casting model train, zero controller, coupler installed. But on the back, there's something that I'm really happy to see, and that's all the different sets and cars you can get. If you look at a lot of older AHM boxes, they all have this on them. As a kid, I always just loved looking over all this stuff and imagining what it would be like to own some of these pieces. So I think it makes for a really good piece of advertising and kind of a throwback to something from a different time. One thing I was really surprised to see is that this set claims to come with a 2 amp power supply. It also advertises some different track packs you can buy for this thing, so I guess they're making that too. As for a closer look at the box artwork, it looks okay. There is a little bit of strange blending going on right there, but it's not too bad. The coloring kind of looks like it's straight out of IKEA, but I really care about what's actually inside this box a great deal more. So let's open this thing up and see if it's any good. So you open it up and there's not a whole lot to see. Hopefully the track and everything else is somewhere in here. It looks like they have bothered to put some very basic instructions in here, and even a diagram of the locomotive. That's pretty cool. Let's have a look at the power supply and track itself. Here's the wall wart, and it does claim to be a 14 volt 2 amp power supply and our 2-track connection. And then here's all of our track. There's just enough to create a very basic loop with 18 radius curves. And it actually comes with a re-railer, which is kind of cool. I've never seen that in a starter set before. And to be honest, this might be a very helpful thing for beginners out there, so really not a bad idea. As for the track itself, I really like the shade of brown they chose for the ties. It looks pretty realistic. Unfortunately, the rails themselves are steel, which is not great. This stuff is known for oxidizing over time and rusting. It also does have the holes required to actually nail this down to like a sheet of plywood, which might be a really good thing because this type of track on its own really does not hold together too well on the floor. As for the train itself, it looks pretty minimal in terms of detail, really what you would expect for a starter set. But what's really impressive is that this actually has metal wheels. Even on modern starter sets, that's not very common, and it's really good because this won't pollute your track with the residue it leaves behind. The couplers are about what you would expect for a set like this. They're just the old horn hook ones. Really nothing too fancy right here, but that might actually be a good thing because for someone like a kid who might be rough with this, these are going to be a little bit more reliable than plastic knuckle couplers. The car also does feel like there's a little bit of weight added somewhere in the middle here. And then we've just got this very basic copper. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a parody of any particular brand, but same thing with the quality. Feels like it's got a decent weight for what it is. As for the controller, it seems very reminiscent of a Mahano one. The switch design is quite a bit different, but the actual handle itself is very similar. I could definitely see there possibly being some inspiration in this design right here. It certainly doesn't feel high-end by any means, but the switches actually feel somewhat tactile. And then finally, we've got the locomotive. There are a lot of signs that this is part of a cheaper set, but it's kind of what you would expect for such a thing. Now, I already did a review on one of these things, and one of the problems I had with that engine was that the wheels seemed quite loose. On this one, they seem a little bit tighter, which is good, but certainly not up to the same standards that Model Power had, so it's going to be interesting to see how this thing runs. Anyway, I'll go get a board so we can hopefully set all this up and see how it all works together. I think that this is going to make a really good surface to set this whole train set up on, especially since this type of track without the roadbed is a little bit more susceptible to what you place it down on. Many train sets from the 70s came with this style of track, and as a result, a lot of locomotives I've worked on from that era are packed with carpet fibers. I even got a starter set back in 2011 which had roadbed track while me and my family were at a rental house, and I was quite shocked after 6 months of running it on the floor without any carpeting just how many fibers from bits of clothing, hair, and stuff like that got wound into that locomotive. So if you have a piece of plywood or a piece of foam or even just a tabletop, it might save you a little bit of grief at some point in the future. Overall, that wasn't too difficult to put together. There were a few rail joiners which were a little bit stiff, but overall nothing too bad. The only thing that does concern me about this track is that parts of it already look to be oxidized right out of the box. So if you live in a humid area, I think that this could very easily become a problem quite quickly. But let's not write it off just yet. Let's actually see if it will work. I guess the plug just kind of sits out like that. Does look a bit flimsy, but I guess that works. Well, it does seem to get the job done. I think it's more intended for a straight piece of track, but considering none of the rails have a re-railer, it's not a bad compromise. But now it's time to see, will this thing run? Alright. Uh-oh. Nothing. That's not a good start. They weren't lying when they called this the zero controller. Like, nothing comes out of it. That works. That also works just fine. So I'm very suspicious that's our problem. So this right here is not our culprit, which means I just tore the controller apart for no reason. Is it just put together so crappy it doesn't make contact? Yeah, look at that. Not even connected to anything. For somebody like me who's been in the hobby for a decade and a half, you start to learn how to narrow down electrical issues with this stuff, but for a beginner, this is pretty bad right here. My foreman especially is not happy about this. It's okay, boss. We'll fix it despite the quality. Okay, train, it's time for your redemption arc. Oh, yeah, there we go. That seems fine. We're gonna send this thing flying off the layout if we can it. Okay, to be fair, that was just a little bit of camera work on my part. This thing actually handles the corners pretty well, even at high speeds, so that's good to see. The only thing I did notice at wide open throttle was that the headlight didn't seem to be working, so I think we should go open this thing up and see what the electronics inside it are looking like. Apparently it did pass quality inspection, so that's good. And there is a bulb in here, which they appear to have hot glued into place. That's kind of interesting. Quite a bit of electrical tape holding all of this together. I don't know if that's just for a little bit of wire management, but I don't remember there being quite so much on the last model. Otherwise, this doesn't look too bad, but the question is, does this just have a defective bulb? So the electrical system does appear to be kind of inconsistent. I don't know if there's some crappy wiring hidden under this electrical tape, but let's dig into it and see what's going on there. So I think unfortunately we've just got a bad bulb with this one. It lit up and then it got really bright for like a split second, and now it doesn't seem to want to come back, so I think it's just a defective one. At least the reversing light seems to be working pretty well. So clearly there are some quality assurance issues with this set, but one thing I want to check, because it's an important one, is whether or not the circuit breaker this controller claims to have actually works, because even though the output of this controller is only a half amp, the input is 2 amps, so if this thing failed, I could see it burning up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this at wide open throttle, and we'll see if it will cut the power if I drop this on the track and sustain it. So you see the lights going dim, so it's all shorted right now. And it just went bright, so I think it did cut the power. Let's see if I remove this, if it resumes. And it didn't, so it seems like the circuit breaker in this thing does work. Is it just going to automatically reset, or do we need to unplug this? So far, nothing. And I do see the engine moving. Oh, and it's cut again. And the locomotive comes right back, so at least that feature seems good. Now to finish things off, let's do a bit of a low speed test here. I'm actually kind of surprised that's not too bad for what it is. Well folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. My final thoughts on this set are that you get what you pay for. If you can find one of these things for 30 or 40 bucks brand new, I think it really shouldn't be too surprising that the quality is not going to be the greatest out there. Even if everything had worked perfectly, I don't know if I would pay $68 for one of these things again. But for 30 or 40 bucks, I could definitely forgive a lot of the smaller quality issues, like the track being slightly oxidized or the headlight not working, because it is quite a push getting a locomotive, rolling stock, a loop of track, and a controller for such a little amount of money in today's world. I think the only place I have a harder time forgiving this set is with this piece right here, because it was defective right out of the box, and if a beginner got this set, they might put it all together, and when they discover it doesn't work, blame themselves and get so discouraged that they might leave the hobby, which is pretty bad. So I really hope they can kind of bump up their quality assurance and maybe redesign this, or at least test these things before they leave the factory to make sure these are good, because honestly this set wasn't all bad. The locomotive did work fine, which is good to see. The rolling stock, despite how it looks, was actually kind of impressive in my opinion, because the weight was really good, it didn't have any derailing issues, the couplers did their job, and the metal wheels rolled really nicely, so that is pretty good for the price point in my opinion. And the controller was actually quite a little star, you know. I think that it's quite responsive, even at lower speeds, which for a starter set controller I think is quite impressive. And the circuit breakers seem to do a pretty good job, which is great to see, because that's a very important safety feature if something goes wrong with your layout. I don't know if I would completely trust it at this price point, but it did do what it was supposed to when tested this one time. So yeah, really not too bad for the money in that regard. I am kind of rooting for this company because, you know, they're trying to bring back something that hasn't been in the hobby for at least 10 years in my opinion, and that's budget train sets. And from what I can tell, they're trying to develop some of their own new parts right here, which is a struggle. So it's possible this set is just an early run, and as they make more of them, they'll iron out some of the problems and these things will get better. But I really hope they can improve it, because again, for beginners, I could see this being quite a problem right here. I've already placed an order for one of the cheap diesel versions of this set from Alibaba for $40, so when or if that shows up, we'll report back, and hopefully that one will not have that same issue, and maybe the brand can kind of go through a bit of a redemption arc. But until then, I think that they might have some work to do before this could be a good little train set that could be sold in museums and things like that. Anyways, let me know what you think of this train set in the comments, and until then, I just want to thank you all so much for watching.